What's good? This is JVB representing SPDNS SportsPerDiem.com. UFC 241 was last night, and we have a new UFC heavyweight champion, that man being Stipe Miocic, defeating Daniel Cormier by TKO in the 4th round to regain his UFC heavyweight championship. Now, this was a very gritty fight, man. You had both of these guys basically fighting in a phone booth. Two big heavyweights, two strong heavyweights just laying the leather on each other, man. And for the first 3 rounds, DC was getting the better of the fight, especially in the first round where DC was like a final boss in a video game, you know. He came out there, he was just beating up Stipe. He was connecting on everything he was throwing. He was just walking with his hands down, inviting Stipe to throw punches, but DC would do a thing where it's like he's coming at you like a mummy. His hands are extended. And he does it in every fight, but I didn't really pay attention to it. But when he was coming in and throw strikes, you would see him grabbing Stipe's hands and just throwing combinations at him. And he was landing a lot. He was very effective. And like I said, man, he looked unstoppable in the first round. He also had Stipe up in like a slam position. I don't know how DC was going to drop him, but he could have just went ahead and crushed Stipe right there. And I think Stipe figured that out as well, because he saw that he was looking straight to the ground, and if DC would have fell right on top of him, he probably would have knocked him out right there, probably would have snapped his neck all the way up. But Stipe started to move around a little bit, and DC did slam him, but it was a much more safer slam, if you can say that, for Stipe. But he lived to see another day, and he lived to see another round after that slam, but DC still won the 2nd and 3rd rounds. Now, DC did get tired after that first round. You visibly saw DC getting tired. He came in better shape than he's ever been at heavyweight, especially in the UFC. But you can see the fatigue in this man's face. He was getting tired. And I want to attribute that to age, because he was winning the fight and he looked good. But this is a very grueling fight for both guys. These guys just punching each other, rock 'em, sock 'em, throwing big, heavy shots at each other, man. These two heavyweights. So these guys are tired as hell. DC more tired than Stipe is, but Stipe wasn't changing it up. In the 2nd round, same thing, throwing hand combinations. You know, the commentary crew was talking about it like, why isn't he throwing leg kicks? We know DC is a great wrestler, and he just took him down in the first round, but why isn't he mixing up his strikes? Because as we've seen in the past, Mr. John Jones throwing leg strikes, throwing calf kicks, throwing knees, and all kinds of different strikes to throw DC off balance. And then you hit him with the element of surprise. Then you throw combinations to the head when he's not expecting it. So 2nd round go by, DC wins that round. Then in the 3rd round, Stipe does get a takedown on DC. He takes Daniel Cormier down. But for the most part, it was a carbon copy of the 1st and 2nd rounds. So I gave that round to DC. Finally, Stipe mixes it up. He starts throwing heavy, hard left hooks to the body. And as we all know, as combat sports fans, that's money in the bank. It was an old adage in boxing, but it exists in all combat sports. Boxing, kickboxing, mixed martial arts. The shots to the body are so important because it takes so much out of your opponent. And it creates so many more opportunities when attacking your opponent. You know, we see this so much in combat sports. You know, in boxing recent history, you had Miguel Cotto, who was notorious for ripping at the body. And now present day, you have a guy like Errol Spence, who was known for ripping at the body. Those shots take so much energy out of your body. And not only does it fatigue you, but like I said, it creates more opportunities to land bigger headshots in the long run. And that's what happened in the 4th round last night, where Stipe started going with that left hook to the body over and over and over again. DC was already tired, but you could tell it was visibly hurting him. So Stipe continued to throw the left hook to the body, and then you saw him try to change levels with a left hook to the head. But to DC's credit, he noticed it, so he was prepared for it. But what did Stipe do? He kept going back to it because he kept landing it. He kept throwing that left hook to the body, left hook to the body. If this was a video game, every time that hook landed, you could see DC's energy just bam, 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 continued dropping to the point where Stipe threw a couple of right hands, knocking DC back to the cage. DC is tired as hell. He's getting his body beat up, and Stipe continues to land a couple of more strikes until Herb Dean saves DC. Insane and new UFC heavyweight champion Stipe Miocic getting his revenge on Daniel Cormier and possibly reigning on DC's farewell fight. Now, after the fight, DC was very congratulatory of Stipe. He took the loss like a champ, and he also talked about retirement, but he didn't outwardly say he was retiring in that moment. He said it's something that he and his wife needs to talk about. He's 40 years old. He has his hands in a lot of other projects. You know, he is a UFC commentator. He does the UFC detail stuff like Kobe Bryant does for basketball. DC does it for ESPN as well for MMA. So he has his hands in different things. He has a lot of money already, and he's going to continue making a lot of bread. So maybe this was DC's last fight. And for me personally, I don't mind if it was. You know, you can say do a trilogy, Stipe versus DC 3, but that doesn't really need to happen. And as far as the whole Jon Jones saga is concerned, I know he threw some shade at DC last night talking about how Stipe is the greatest heavyweight of all time. But we don't need to see that fight either. We don't need a third fight. Jon won the first two anyway. So we don't need a third fight between DC and Jon Jones. For me, albeit a sad ending, this should be the end for DC. And it's not because he looked bad or anything, because he was winning the fight. If DC had it in him to go the remainder of that fourth round and go the whole fifth round, even if Stipe won those 2 rounds, I think DC would have won by decision and retained the belt. So no, I don't believe DC is shop worn. He could still beat virtually anybody. Even if you exclude Jon Jones, he can beat everybody else. And he has beaten everybody else. But Stipe got his revenge last night, and shout out to Stipe. Stipe lost last year, July 2018, to Daniel Cormier. He lost his heavyweight title, and he wanted an immediate rematch. This man said he was not going to fight anybody else unless their name is Daniel Cormier. That's the only fight he wanted. He wanted to get his belt back. And albeit he was kind of lucky because the Brock Lesnar stuff fell through. Brock Lesnar really didn't want anything to do with UFC. He just wanted to get paid more by the WWE. But that fell through. So after DC and Derek Lewis stepped up on short notice for that New York City card, and Daniel Cormier easily got past the Black Beast, it was like, who's left? I mean, you could have done Ngannou against Cormier. That would have been kind of fun, but Stipe got his rematch, and Stipe took advantage of that. And shout out to Stipe because he had to pull this one through because he was getting beat up for 3 rounds. And he showed why he is a great champion. He showed why he's one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, if not the greatest heavyweight of all time. The only other man having a claim to that, in my opinion, is Daniel Cormier. But he showed why he's one of the greats last night. And shout out to Stipe. I think now Francis Ngannou, who's just gone on a tear after losing to Stipe and then losing to Derek Lewis. He finished Curtis Blades, he finished Cain Velasquez, and he finished Junior Dos Santos, all in the first round. So now Francis Ngannou is going to get his well-deserved rematch against Stipe, and I'm interested to see how that fight goes. I'm intrigued to see what changes that Francis Ngannou may have made in preparation for a rematch against Stipe Miocic. But that's going to be a great fight. Congrats to Stipe on regaining his UFC heavyweight championship. And congratulations to Daniel Cormier. If this is his last fight, man, future Hall of Famer, one of the greatest of all time. He has a gig already with the UFC, so we'll still see a lot of Daniel Cormier. He's one of the good guys of the sport, one of the nicest guys, and I'm happy that he finally got over with the fans. Because remember when that Jon Jones-DC rivalry started, people hated Daniel Cormier. People talk so much shit about Daniel Cormier, and Daniel Cormier would say, "Why are you guys booing me? I'm not the one getting in trouble with the law and doing all this crazy shit. I'm a great husband. I'm a great father. I'm a former USA Olympian. Why are you guys booing me?" But after a while, we saw Jon Jones have a couple of more mishaps, and we also saw Daniel Cormier kicking ass. And the combination of those things finally clicked with fans, And now he's a beloved figure, you know. He's a big fan favorite now. So shout out to Daniel Cormier. Shout out to Stipe. Shout out to both of those guys for that fight, because that was a very entertaining heavyweight fight between the two greatest heavyweights in mixed martial arts history. Not just UFC history, but MMA history. So congrats to both of those guys. Congrats to Stipe regaining his UFC heavyweight championship. And congrats to DC, if this is his last fight, on the Hall of Fame career. But I'm done, and I appreciate the listen. If you enjoyed the video, show some love, like the video, and share the video with fellow MMA fans. And also, do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, take it easy. God bless. Peace.